In the name of Christ who calls us. Amen. So, this is the Feast of Stephen, and admittedly, that's kind of a tough story. Stephen was the first Christian martyr, as we heard just a moment ago. He was also the first deacon. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about his diaconal role today than his martyrdom. Remember the old phrase, not very old, but what WWJD, what would Jesus do? I'm going to change that today to WWSS. What would Stephen say? Because on our Feast of Stephen, we also have our annual meeting, and this is our day to really think about who we are and what our mission is. And while I don't want to eliminate the possibility that we might have to be martyrs, I don't think it's likely. So instead, I'm going to focus on his diaconal gifts. In the very first part of the story, we hear about the apostles and how they have a problem. And their problem is that they're really busy sharing the good news and talking about the message of Jesus. And in the midst of all this, the church, the baby church, it's not even a church at this point. It's just a kind of a gathering of folks. And it's expanding rapidly. And the vision of equality and caring for everybody is really strong, and they're sharing their goods with one another, and they're sharing their food with one another, and they're looking out for widows and orphans, and all that good stuff is happening. But as the baby church begins to expand, some things start going haywire. I mean, this is what happens when groups grow. When groups grow, they become more diverse. They become more complicated, they become more spread out, and communication issues arise, and blah, blah, blah. And pretty quickly, this church, which is this new baby church, which is supposed to be all about justice and caring for the poor, isn't doing such a great job. There's a group of people who are being ignored. The Greek-speaking widows, apparently, are not being cared for. And, of course, this is distressing to the apostles, but they're also feeling like, dang, I got plenty to do. I don't know what to do. So they create this new order that we now call the diaconate. And it probably didn't happen in quite so orderly a fashion as we get in hindsight from the first chapters of Acts. But according to the story, they appoint these people we call deacons, and Stephen the first among them. And their job is to make sure that the church walks the walk. We talk the talk about justice. We talk the talk about inclusion. But are we doing it? And sometimes that takes a little bit of administration. It takes a little bit of organization. It takes stepping back and saying, what are we actually doing? And let's make sure that it works. So, Stephen gets the job of caring for the least. The diaconate is therefore kind of a funny contradiction of a job. There's a tension built right into it, because deacons are both supposed to be company men, if you will, or company women in our day. That is, they're appointed. You know, you notice that the scriptures say the apostles laid hands on them. I mean, this is an actual, ordination of some sort. And they're expected to kind of keep order and be under orders. But at the same time, they're charged with making sure that the church is about justice, which means they have a prophetic role. So there's always a tension. They're always in that difficult position of making sure that we're being true to our call. So what would Stephen say? WWSS. What would Stephen say to this parish today this parish that was named after him. I think one thing he would be quick to say is, don't be surprised by conflict among you. If you're growing, if you're caring for any kind of diversity, if you are reaching out to new people, there's going to be a variety of interests and concerns and points of view among you. That's normal. I mean, it's in the first chapters of Acts, which we have to assume are kind of, looking back with fond nostalgia at the early days of the church. I mean, there's already a honey glow on those passages. And yet, they record very distinctly, people were complaining. Don't be surprised. And people should complain. When the church isn't being the church, they should. And it's going to take work for us to figure out what that should look like. It's going to take work for us to weigh the various demands, concerns, visions, and views of genuinely faithful people. And if we're growing, and if we're reaching out, and if we're not only tolerating, but welcoming and embracing the messiness of humanity, of all of us, we'll have some stuff to work through.